Welcome to the Balanced Badass Podcast, the show for multitaskers determined to stay balanced and badass without losing their minds. Every week, we help you manage your overflowing calendar and household, making sure you still have time to breathe, laugh, and savor that much-needed glass of wine at the end of the day. Think of this podcast as your weekly dose of practical advice, humor, and tough love, just like catching up with a friend who really gets it. I'm Tara Kermit, your personal growth coach, helping you handle how was your day without a meltdown. Now let's get into today's episode. All right, y'all, I am excited for today's episode. We are getting into the incredible power of the subconscious mind with Andrea Ramírez, a hypnotherapist, channeler, and spiritual coach who's transforming lives by helping people reprogram the deep-rooted patterns that hold them back. And, I love talking about our convictions and where they come from, so I am personally excited about this conversation. So Andrea's journey is nothing short of inspiring. After experiencing bullying, trauma, and a near-death health crisis, she found her way to hypnotherapy and discovered its potential to create profound shifts in mindset, in your relationships, and in well-being. So now she's on a mission to help others tap into that same wisdom of their subconscious to live healthier, more fulfilling lives. So what do you say we just get right into it? Welcome to the Balanced Badass Podcast, my friend.
Hey, Tara, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. And, I enjoyed even connecting with you just a few minutes before and really excited about where our conversation might lead us today. But before we jump into kind of the meat of our discussion, I always start every guest episode with an icebreaker question. And so my icebreaker question for you is, what is something that you are just loving in your life right now?
It's many things, from the simple things like being able to be in an area that has nice, clean air, lots of nature, the love I have in my life. And although I have my husband, but I always think of my pet when I think of that.
I am right there with you.
It's like I think of her. That's the picture that comes up. And in the other hand, I was just chatting this morning with two other women that I am associated with this self hypnosis app that we are putting together, and makes me very happy that we're all aligned towards the same goal, and it's to help women heal and thrive. And the fact that we have tried everything in the book and none of it has worked for us, and that is pushing us to find our own way, and that is actually working, the way of the heart, so to speak. That's one of the things that makes me the happiest right now.
I love hearing that. First off, what's your pet? I need to know a little bit more about your pet.
Oh, Mila is a border collie mix. She is 10 years old now, and we got her when she was 2 weeks old. We actually rescued her, and I had to bottle feed her and do all the things like a dog mommy should do. And yeah, we are all she knows. The first thing she saw, the first thing she heard, and she sucks my thumb like a baby. So I made this little tattoo there in my hand because this
Aww.
is inside of there. That's where her fang goes, and I have calluses here and here because of her teeth.
Oh my gosh.
And
I love
yeah,
that. I
she's
love
very
that.
cute.
I am a dog person too, as my listeners know. I have 5 dogs.
Oh,
So
nice.
I totally get that. And I
Mm.
understand the deep connection that we have with our pets because they are just as much family as any human can be too. So I
Yes,
love that.
yes, absolutely.
hmm I also really loved what you were talking about with building that. You said it was going to be an app.
Yes, but right now
Yeah,
it's a web app. It will be an app, proper app in time.
that's awesome. Yeah, I love what you were talking about, how just being in alignment with that and
Mm.
knowing kind of what worked and what hasn't worked for you, and how you're using that to build this with folks that you are in alignment with, and there's just that energy exchange. That speaks a lot to what I talk about when it comes to burnout, because a lot of burnout just comes from being misaligned in
Yeah.
certain ways. And also really learning from self-awareness and knowing what works and what doesn't work for our own selves will help you along the way. I call it in design thinking, it's called prototyping. So it's really
Mhm.
figuring out, you're testing things out, you're figuring out what's going to work in the long run. So I just love that you started with that, and you can even just see in your eyes like you lit up when you started talking about it, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's something like it's our baby also. It's something that came from the heart and through experiences that the three of us, like the three founders, have experienced burnout, and the three of us have found different ways to overcome it. And so we really wanted to put the best, most effective tool that we had at hand with all these other techniques that we can, align together for this and create this app to help women, especially women that are in business, or it's not even burnout that happens in only at businesses. Some people have familial burnout. I had also burnout after I was in the hospital. My body was completely charred from all the pain and all the medications and then the recovery. So burnout is it's like a wide net of different symptoms that affects us all.
Yeah, yeah, it's very nuanced and, a very personalized experience too, which kind
Mhm.
of, jumping off of that, let's talk a little bit about your story because it's incredibly powerful. So, I mentioned in the intro, like from you were facing bullying and trauma, and then you've alluded to overcoming a very serious health challenge. Can you share a little bit about how these experiences led you to discover hypnotherapy and
Mhm.
to embrace it as a tool for transformation for you?
Yeah. So, growing up, I grew up with what you could call a textbook narcissist mother. And it is something that I didn't have a tag to put on for many, many years. Now everybody talks about narcissism. The word has almost become prostituted because everybody is using it and abusing it. But I grew up with her being basically a textbook narcissist. So, with all that in place, um, because I was being bullied at home, this also mirrored at school. Inherently, the same kind of energy pattern was attracting people towards me that would abuse me in one way or another. In the same way, I've always had this very spiritual side to myself, so that kind of kept me sane. Growing up, I always knew that there was like a higher power, a higher dimension to my life that was beyond that what other people could say or project on me. But of course, this affects you because growing up, this is your blueprint for life. And I mean, eventually, I did work on my health, my mental health, especially my emotional health. And in 2018, my body basically said enough. Now
Mm.
it's time to deal with all the memories that are stuck in your body. I um, I was having severe symptoms of burnout because I was repeating those emotional patterns that I had acquired in childhood about being very much in need of control, very much putting a bar so high that I couldn't be up to my own standards, and putting this bar so high into other people, to my employees, that they couldn't keep up with me. And so it was very toxic. And my body said enough. I ended up in the hospital. I was misdiagnosed for the first 6 months. So I spent 6 months with the wrong treatment. And finally, when I ended up in the ER, I was 3 days away from kidney failure. There was no way to get any of my vitals going. The nurses couldn't find my veins. If they found a vein, it would literally dissolve. So It was really bad.
Yeah.
And during that time, I spent a whole month in the hospital. And during that time, by the time I was able to read again and look at a picture without feeling pain, because I had so much pain in my body that my nervous system was fried. My brain was fried. I couldn't look at a picture without feeling pain. I felt pain by looking at things. I felt pain when I was talking. So after the pain subsided, I started to research because I was told that I had a chronic condition that will never leave my body. And that made me so upset. And I refused to take that as my truth. So I started investigating. And this is when I discovered Dr. Gabor Mate. He is a doctor specialized in trauma, and he has a very compassionate approach to trauma, which really made me fall in love with him and in his practice. And with him, I discovered that 80% of all the autoimmune diseases in humanity, in the population, 80% are experienced or had by women versus the 20% of men. And this happened because one, childhood trauma, and second, societal conditioning.
Mm.
We are always putting everybody else and everything else in front of us, of our health, of everything. And we're taking emotional responsibility for others too. So this is like a snowball. And then the second one that I always forget to talk about, but I love him so much, Dr. Bruce Lipton. He talks about epigenetics, but he also talks about something really interesting, that from the last trimester of our mom's pregnancy until 7 to 12 years old, or brain waves, or brain is working on theta brain waves, which is hypnosis. So we are literally being hypnotized from the last trimester. Every emotion, everything that our mother experienced before we were born is registered in our subconscious. And everything else that happened, every word, every emotion, we did not have the tools to deal with any of that. But all of this was recorded in our subconscious as a program. So that is the blueprint of who we are. That is the motherboard with all the original programs of our computer. And that was fascinating to me, realizing that the answer to most of our ailments is in our subconscious. It's there. So by the time I left the hospital, life put me two wonderful doctors in front of me. They are both MDs, but at the same time, they both work with holistic medicine. And one of them worked with hypnotherapy, and I experienced it myself. And I haven't had a flare up since 2020. I am not taking any sort of medications, nothing at all. And I am listening to my body, and I'm in tuning my body so much more than before I got sick, which makes me really happy because it's not so reactive anymore, the way I react in front of my triggers, but it's more of an observational standpoint every time something presents in my reality and triggers me. And because of that, I decided to study hypnotherapy and to put it together with all these other techniques that I had from before that were rather spiritual. And I decided to make like a program of its own where I put all these things together to help people, because hypnotherapy is so powerful. The system that I work with is so incredibly fast that between 1 to 3 sessions, you already see changes. I've had incredible stories of, like, one of my patients, she got rid of chronic pain in 1 session, which for me was, even for me, it was unbelievable because I thought, okay, I'm going to have to work a little bit on this one.
Mhm.
And so many other things, like I've helped people out of burnout. And because this type of hypnotherapy is so compassionate, which means you don't have to relive anything that happened to you. You don't even have to tell me what happened to you. We can just work on it because you're subconscious. No, that's all that matters. And the nice work, for example, with people with burnout is that when we start working together and they start changing, I see how they change. But they don't realize it. So they always come to me and say, "Oh, my husband told me that I was doing this differently, or I wasn't reacting to this anymore, or I stopped doing these other things, or my friends see me happier now. They're asking me if I'm okay because I'm like I feel lighter, and they're curious because I was doing so bad, and now I'm like okay." And I said, "Yes, of course. I mean, you're healing. This is what you came here for." And it's a beautiful way of working because it's subtle, it's compassionate, it's loving, and it's your own subconscious that comes up with the solutions. I don't do anything. I'm just facilitating the change.
That's amazing. First off, your story is just so profound. And I think to me, what spoke most to me is when you talked about how now you're very in tune with your body.
Mm.
And while I'm not 100% familiar with hypnotherapy, I know that a lot of it is focused on just listening to what's happening within you and paying attention to that and acting on that and really embracing what goes on the
Mhm.
inside. And I that speaks a lot to me because with my own personal experience with burnout several times, I started to lose touch of what was going on internally, what was happening in my body, or I was ignoring things like the internal signs that were coming up. And now, like you, I pay more attention. Like when things start to not sit right at the moment, like you said, I'm more proactive about it. I'm not as reactive anymore. And I think that there's so much power in that, to be able to address it head on. So that way, my whole mission is really to help folks build resistance to burnout. You may not be able to avoid it or have a burnout proof life completely, but you can build that resistance with the right tools. And it sounds like what you're really working on is such a great and powerful tool for that.
Yes, it's very empowering because it's non-abrasive, it's guilt-free. There is a lot of guilt around, especially for women. There is a lot of guilt around why do we get burnout? And I don't know, maybe it's easier to see it from the outside, but when you are experiencing it, you can't see further than your nose. You are so overwhelmed. It's like a mountain of things constantly falling on top of you. So there are certain parts of some therapies that I do not agree with when they point out, oh, this is happening to you because X. Like, it's your responsibility. Yes, it's my responsibility. But what if all of this is subconscious programming? I don't even know why I'm behaving like this. I don't even know why I have this immense need for approval. I don't even know why I'm being such a people pleaser. I don't even know why I need to be in control all the time. I don't know why I'm so afraid of fear of failure. Like, and this is something that we have so internalized we cannot see it. And this is one of the things, for example, Dr. Bruce Lipton says, we don't see the programs in ourselves, other people see them for us. And this is also, like before, when the other way around, when the husband or the friends were saying to my patients, my clients, oh, you have changed, you're doing different things. In the same way, when we are entering into that burnout state or that anxiety state or that stressed out state, that people can see how we change, but we cannot see it ourselves.
Yeah. And it happens so gradually,
Mhm.
typically, right? And so it's harder to see when you're living it day to day. It's just like we don't see our hair grow every centimeter or whatever it grows.
Exactly.
But then you come back and you see someone who hasn't seen you in a while and they're like, wow, your hair's longer. The same situation is with burnout. And that's with my experience, the the most recent time, I knew things were off, like I knew things weren't right. I was having a lot of physical responses to my burnout, but I wasn't defining it as burnout until my husband really started bringing things to my awareness, like things that I hadn't even noticed. And that's what it took. It took him, it took my mom, it took some other friends to like basically be like, something ain't right, like you need to fix this. Um, and I think that that's where I find value in reaching out to others for help when you're in that kind of recovery phase. Especially, like, to me, complete strangers are often the best folks
Oh yeah.
to help you through it because they don't have the history with you. They can really look at it objectively from a completely different perspective. So that kind of leads to my second question. And you've answered and responded to this in some way, but I'm hoping you can dig a little deeper into this. Is that, many folks either turn to therapy, they turn to coaching, they look up self-help practices on the internet. They're following Instagram and TikTok and all of these social medias to find tools to add to their toolkit to address their challenges, specifically when it comes to burnout. And I'm curious, from your expertise and your own experience, what do you think makes hypnotherapy unique compared to these other approaches? What sets it apart so that it can supplement maybe some of these other approaches and just be another tool in your toolkit?
Yes. So if you think about it, we spend 5% of our day working on our conscious mind and 95 of our day working with our subconscious mind. So most of the day, 95% of the day, we're running with our subconscious mind, with all those subconscious programs. So for example, having these New Year's resolutions, they often fail because we work on them with willpower. That's 5% of our brain, that's 5% of our power. And having tools to add to your toolkit to take care of yourself, practical things, it's great, it's perfect. But the difference with hypnotherapy is that we access that 95% of your subconscious mind, which I would like to think is akin to a divine mind because it's highly creative. So the difference is when we work with hypnotherapy, our subconscious mind works around 30,000 times faster than the subconscious mind, which means the changes that we can achieve through one or two or three sessions, they go so fast and they last forever because we go into that motherboard and pick that program that no longer serves you, and I ask subconscious in its immense wisdom and creativity to create another program that will make your quality of life better, that will protect you, that will be good for you, but without that old behavior that was hurting you. Because our subconscious doesn't have a logic either. So maybe you don't like to go to public gatherings too often. So what happens? Maybe your subconscious says, okay, in order to avoid this, I'm going to give you a panic attack. And you're like, oh my God, why do I have panic attacks? I was fine. And that's the subconscious just trying to protect you. So, for example, we work with this. We ask subconscious, can you do the same but without the panic attack? And subconscious does the change. And like I said, the changes are so subtle that it's almost like waking up to a new reality of yourself. And it addresses the root causes rather than putting makeup on what's already there or trying to very consciously reframe something to only fall again into burnout or into stress or into anxiety in the next 1, 2, 3 years.
I love the idea of picking the program that doesn't serve you and putting one that does
Yes.
back in. And even just the way you described of asking the subconscious to pick a different option, to go a different route, that really depicts the care and the kind of carefulness of
Mm,
hypnotherapy that you were describing
mm,
earlier, about how gentle it is and how it's really about having that space where you can explore these things in the subconscious, but it's also having a conversation with your subconscious. It's having a relationship
yeah.
with what's going on internally. And that's such a neat perspective to think about of having that relationship internally, especially, you know, that those statistics about how much time we're spending in our conscious versus subconscious. This is why for me, like I talk a lot about like our convictions and that yes, we do have a role in our own burnout experiences, but that doesn't mean that we can't do something about it either. And that sometimes it's not known to us. Sometimes we
Yeah,
have to bring that to light before we can address them. So a lot of burnout recovery to me is self-awareness and
absolutely.
understanding
Mhm.
and doing that reflection that many of us may not want to do all the time because it can be hard work sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard work because you toughen up over the years. It's like burnout doesn't happen from one day to the next. Burnout is like every day you put a brick on that wall every day until you are, that wall literally falls on top of you. And so, yeah, it's our convictions, it's what we believe, and when we toughen up so much, when we build these defenses to ourselves, it's because there is something that is really hurt inside, and it hurts too much to just look at it. Nevertheless, feel it and make friends with it and account for it as if it's, yeah, it's part of myself. I'm not too happy or too proud about it, but it's part of myself, because we need to toughen up in order to move through the world, through our jobs, through our projects, to deal with other people. We can't um, be having a cathartic moment every time something triggers us. It's not ideal. It re-traumatizes our nervous system again. So this is why, in a way, I think hypnotherapy is like the key to open that door to a space of change that is very loving and very subtle. It's a place where you can find yourself and make friends with yourself again and address those parts that hurt, because right now we have changed those programs of self-hurt and projections of others onto us that we took as true, that were hurting us. And now it's like, almost like, you know what, I'm so sorry I did this to you so many years. Now let's work on this and let's do something better. And it could be channeled in many different ways. Like in my way, I want to help other people, hopefully overcome and not fall into burnout. Although I understand that sometimes life needs to slap us in the face in order to wake up, because that's how smart we are. But working with our subconscious, it's no joke. And once you understand how it works, you also pay more attention to how others behave and the information and everything you allow into your system: music, movies, books, songs, all of that. Every time we watch a movie, read a book, listen to a song, we are entering into a light state of trance, which means it's all going to our subconscious. Doom scrolling, it's turning our
Mm.
brain into a trash bin, because doom scrolling makes us go into that hypnotic state. And even if we don't watch the videos, our subconscious is picking everything up. The same thing, 5 against 95. I put 5% of attention in what's on the screen, but my 95% is taking in everything. So it's very, very, very important.
Mm. Wow, that has me thinking about like just even more self-care strategies, really focusing on what inputs you're bringing in, which I have talked to folks about, but it goes a little bit deeper than what I was even thinking. So that's a
Yeah,
great
I mean,
point.
we need to be intentional, because our
Yeah.
brain is here to help us survive, not to make us happy. The brain is a survival machine. This is why it's easier to have negative thoughts instead of
Mm.
positive ones. Because if we were all positive, hippie, happy the whole time, maybe we fall over a cliff and we don't even realize it. But because our brain is always trying to protect us as well, we're always going to be more prone to have negative thinking than positive. So we really need to be intentional. It's like really building a muscle of
Mhm.
saying, okay, this is what I'm picking up for myself to be in my subconscious. I don't watch much TV. I don't watch the news, definitely not. I only read the headlines of the news just not to be so out of touch with things. And I pick my music carefully. If I don't understand the lyrics, I ask Google, ChatGPT, whatever it is, to give me the lyrics because I understand how powerful it is. You don't realize how much you tell yourself what you hear or what you see or what you read, because that's the other thing. Our mind doesn't understand what's real and what's not. So if we
Mhm.
close our eyes and imagine you're biting into a lemon, your mouth will water the same way as if you were biting into the lemon. So that's another thing to have in mind. Our brain is not kidding. Our brain is always processing everything that is happening to us.
Yeah. Wow. Which I imagine, that you saying like doom scrolling is basically like having a whole bunch of trash bin, like just a collection of stuff in our subconscious, which I'm curious, like, is that hard to work through that in like a hypnotherapy session? Like, do you have to kind of sift through all of that to get to what you're working towards, or does the subconscious really know what you need?
Subconscious knows better, because otherwise I would be putting my input into you. I would be
Mhm.
putting what I believe is best for you into you. But I don't know what's best for you. You know better what's best for you. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously you do. So this is like somebody going to the hospital with, I don't know, an arm broken, and the nurse or the doctor saying, hmm, you look cold. I'm going to bring you, I don't know, a blanket. That's going to make you feel better. And you're saying, yeah, but I need someone to fix my arm. I'm feeling cold because my blood pressure is on the floor because I'm traumatized. And the nurse is like, in my reality, what I see about you is that you are cold, so I bring you a blanket, but you don't need a blanket. So that's a very stupid example, but that's really how it works. I cannot that And this is why, by the way, the old school hypnotherapy did not work or needed 21 sessions for someone to create change, because it was the therapist saying, you are going to stop smoking, you're going to think it's disgusting, and you stop right now. Okay, you stop smoking, but now I'm addicted to sugar, because the
Mm,
subconscious is going to look for something else to fulfill the same purpose. Why am I smoking? Right?
yeah.
It's not necessarily your addiction to nicotine. It's other things. Do I know? No, you know better. So this is why I open that space of conversation with the subconscious, and subconscious in its infinite wisdom and creativity does a tailor-made jewelry work for yourself.
Mm. Well, let's talk a little bit about kind of what a typical session looks like. How can I don't a 20 to 30-minute session, however long your sessions are, how can that create such a profound shift in someone's mindset and life so quickly? And like you said, like in 1 to 3 sessions, you've seen
Mhm.
dramatic changes. For those that may be unfamiliar with the whole process of hypnotherapy, can you walk us through what that looks like?
Yes. So it's usually 3, 4 parts. At the beginning, we start with a relaxation part, which is technically called like relaxation, induction, and deepener. So, what we do in that phase is imagine a computer that has the browser open with lots of tabs open. So, that's your brain. And what we do in that stage is we close one tab after the other until there is the one tab open. That's your subconscious tab. So, hypnosis is really a state of focused attention. And that is what the first part does, puts you in that very deep state of relaxation, but you're still very much aware. The second part is the change work. That's called the change work. And this is when, after you are in this nice state where your conscious mind went to sleep and your subconscious mind is wide awake, we have a conversation, or I have a conversation with your subconscious, And your subconscious answers to me through your body, through movements in your body, through changes in breathing, through sometimes the color of the skin changes, sometimes it's more rosy, sometimes it's more pale. And once this conversation is finished, or we have reached an agreement with subconscious, I always check in case of like if the subconscious does not agree with something that we have agreed or changes its mind. I can always go through that again and repeat the process to avoid ab reactions. That's a very important part, because I could go ahead and say, okay, the work is done, everything is fine, and then you get an ab reaction. So I like to specifically put attention to that part, making sure that we are 100% on it. And then there is a mix of different techniques, metaphor, storytelling, NLP, um, hypnotic suggestion, that is used to combine the conscious and subconscious into empowering each other to cement that change work. And the last part is the coming out part, when you gradually come out of trance state, which is a very deep relaxation state. And by the time you come out of that state, you feel as if you have taken a wonderful, wonderful nap, like the best nap of your life. So I give you time to stretch and yawn, because you are like so, like just waking up. And then there is a moment for post hypnotic suggestions. This is when we talk a little bit after the session. And what I love to do is to make a recording of the session with theta wave music. So I put a background music tuned to theta brain waves with the recording of the session that it's personalized to you. And you can listen to this every night before you go to sleep until you don't want to hear it anymore. So this also is like we continue building up on the session in between sessions, or if it's just the one session, you take that recording with you. And I always say, people always ask me, and for how long should I listen to it? And I said, just when you don't want it anymore, just leave it. Just your subconscious saying, I've had it. Thank you very much. We're good now. So that's basically what a whole session is.
Wow. That's really cool. Thanks for doing that and walking us through that. Because I'm assuming many folks may have not experienced that. So to know, and that also helps to mitigate any misconceptions about
Yeah.
hypnotherapy as well, which I'm sure you come across all the time.
Yes, all the time. And the most common one is like, am I going to lose control?
Mm,
Or am I going to be completely under? And so there is this fear of losing control, and there is this fear of losing your consciousness, but it's teamwork. It
mhm.
cannot work if you don't want it to work. So again, the example of the couple that the wife sent the husband to the hypnotherapist to stop smoking is not going to work because he doesn't want to. It's the wife that wants to stop, that wants him to stop smoking. So it's it has to be a very conscious decision. Unfortunately, all these entertainment shows had done no good to
Mm,
what hypnosis has, like the therapeutic power of hypnosis. And this is unfortunately the picture that many people have.
yeah. Yeah. So, kind of thinking about that and extending on that a little bit, what would you say to someone who may be skeptical or hesitant to address their concerns and just help them feel more comfortable exploring this as an option for them?
Yes. Um, you have to think about it like a non invasive treatment. So if you are burned out, I'm not going to ask you to tell me your whole story. You just have to tell me, this is happening and I want to change it. Sometimes you don't even have to tell me, because there is also techniques to work directly with subconscious without you having to tell me something, which is really useful when somebody has gone through a very bad traumatizing experience that they do not want to verbalize even.
Mhm.
So in this sense, it's a very respectful kind of therapy. So people should not feel afraid to do it, because it's a gentle technique. It's very subtle. It is powerful, and if you really make the step, it will change your life in one way or another. Maybe you will not notice. We cannot notice our own programs, but others will notice for you, or you will notice in a few days, weeks, months, years' time, when you say, wow, I really turn a different corner after that. So it's not about mind control. It's not about me programming anything into you. It's about me facilitating for you to connect with your inner wisdom. And that is my mission, because I do not want to have chronic clients. I do not want to have clients coming to me for the same issue over and over again. Then there is something wrong. And because it is something so effective, you lose nothing trying, because the worst thing that could happen is that it won't work.
Mm. That's a great perspective. Like, you lose nothing in trying, and you could have everything to gain from
Yeah,
the experience.
potentially, yes.
Yeah. Well, I love this conversation, but I also want to respect our time. So I have one final question for you that I ask every guest on the Balanced Badass podcast. Is that so? This podcast is really all about just balanced living with, as I like to say, badass results. So, how do you define being a balanced badass in your own life?
In my life, being a balanced badass is saying no a lot.
Hmm. Yeah.
Saying no, acting before reacting, which requires a lot of practice on self awareness. And self awareness means making myself questions like, why am I feeling this way towards this situation? Why am I having these thoughts about this other situation? And really sift through what is real and what's imaginary.
Mm.
um, Having my boundaries very well defined, not only towards myself, but towards others, and also know where my boundaries end and the other people's begin, which is an exchange that we're having every day with everyone, whether it's in close distance or through a video call.
Mhm.
Um, I think very much following the golden rule is do unto others as you would like to. I talk to others the way I would like to be talked to. I treat others the way I would like to be treated. I think that is a good golden rule, something that will never grow old.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, I love what you said about asking questions and like exploring kind of why you're feeling certain ways or why you're reacting in certain ways. And um, in a previous episode with a guest, we talked about just being curious about yourself and your environment and taking on kind of that perspective as a researcher, almost like asking the
Yeah.
questions and looking at it objectively and really understanding that. And you can learn so much about yourself if you take that kind of perspective instead of what we tend to do or what we default to of the blaming
Yeah.
perspective. Just switching that little bit of narrative can really make a huge difference,
Hmm.
and I imagine would make a huge difference in your subconscious as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is why we help ourselves through being intentional, because whatever we're intentional with, if we repeat it enough times, it becomes subconscious as well. It becomes a program. And who knows, maybe it's kicking another old program that doesn't serve us anymore, because we have been intentional and work our way through it. So it will take longer probably, but the more we are intentional about it, the more we have self awareness, the more we start to change and heal in ways that we don't even know yet that we're healing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your journey, sharing your expertise, and really showing us how hypnotherapy can really unlock the power of our subconscious to create really some lasting, impactful change. I really do appreciate you spending time with me. Your story is just a testament to resilience, to transformation, and your insights really did hit home for me, and I'm sure they hit home for listeners as well.
Thank you very much for having me, for giving me the time to explain a little bit more about hypno. That is so misunderstood.
Absolutely, yes. I think anytime that we can bring light to different options and different techniques for at least my listeners, then I've considered that a success. So I want to also make sure that our listeners can connect with you if they found something interesting or if they just want to explore your work a little bit more. So where can they find you? Do you have anything that you want to share with the listeners?
Yes. So my website is Andrea Hypno, like short for hypnotherapy, andreahypno.com. There is all my information and all my offerings. And then we have magicalaudios.com. This is where you can find an extensive library of about 80 different self-hypnosis recordings, different types of meditation, different techniques from Ho'oponopono, affirmations, subconscious programming, everything. You will find it there. And also very neatly packaged programs for burnout, confidence, which also works for anxiety, and a new one that we are releasing soon for sleeping better, for beating insomnia. So you can find self-recording audios there. You can read a little bit about our history, since we created this project with a lot of love from 3 different women. And on social media, my Instagram is a little bit more difficult. It's Fortuna Living Spirit, all together, and you will find me there too, and also in Magical Audios on Instagram.
Great. And I'll be sure to add all the links in the show notes so that way folks can easily connect with you. And I can tell you already, I'm probably going to be snagging those insomnia package because I struggle with sleeping myself. So I really do appreciate the work that you do. So thank you and your colleagues for doing this work and for sharing it with the masses as much as you can. And hopefully for our listeners, I really hope that this episode gave you some new perspectives and maybe even a little hope that you can really create some lasting change. And as always, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I'd especially love it if you'd leave a review for the podcast and share this episode with a friend or a family member. And be sure to catch me next time. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for hanging out with me on the Balanced Badass podcast. I hope today's episode brought you a little more balance and a lot more badass in your day. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review. Your support helps more multitaskers like you find the show, and I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, take care of yourself and make good choices, friend. I'll catch you next week.